All right. Good morning, folks. It's noon, but good morning. Thank you all for being here. My name is Brittany. I am a community library specialist here at Corvallis Benton County Public Library. It's a mouthful. That's why we don't say it that often. Thank you all for being here. It's a gorgeous, if chilly day, so I appreciate y'all spending time with us. I'd also like to thank the Random Review Committee, the group of folks who meet once a year in a really long meeting to talk about all the best books we could invite folks to come talk about. It's a pretty big commitment. There's a lot of legwork in finding folks to come in and organize and tell us all about stuff. So thank you. Also want to thank Gary Whitehouse for writing our wonderful press releases. Thank you, Gary. And then, of course, shout out to the Friends of the Library for their co-sponsorship and support of Random Review. If you don't know, the Friends not only founded and ran Random Review for 30 years, they also coordinate and run book sales whose funds help benefit the library and support us in tons of ways. You can learn more about becoming a friend and or volunteering with them at their website, friendsofthecbclibrary.org. Speaking of websites, if you visit our Random Review webpage, you'll find the schedule of events and book lists for each reviewed book, also compiled by volunteer Gail Gerdeman. Thank you, Gail. As well as recordings of past seasons. We're live streaming all the Random Reviews this season, so you have the option to tune in online if you ever can't make it in person, and that link is also on the Random Review page. All right. Today's speaker is Cleavon Smith, whose immersive theater project, The Fillmore Eclipse, based on Bop City, a restaurant and jazz club located in San Francisco's historic Fillmore district, opened in April 2024. Cleavon's other plays include The Incrementalist, The Flats, co-written with Lauren Gunderson and Jonathan Spector, and The Last Sermon of Sister Imani, which was nominated for a 2018 Theater Bay Area Best Production Award. Additionally, Cleavon has had dozens of short plays performed in theaters in Ann Arbor, Berkeley, LA, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose. Music is a frequent element in his plays, and he has written the lyrics and or music for 4 of them. Cleavon's current projects include script consulting on an immersive show about Elvis produced in London, a commissioned adaptation of Tyler Merritt's I Take My Coffee Black, a series of site-specific and immersive one-acts in a Corvallis coffee shop, and adaptation of the children's book Imani's Moon, as well as Romeo and Juliet, for which he received an Aron Harris Theater and a Folger Shakespeare Library grant, respectively. Cleavon grew up in a rural community just outside of Tupelo, Mississippi, before serving in the Navy after graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy. Cleavon received an MFA in creative writing from Mills College and splits his time as a member of TheaterWorks, Silicon Valley's inaugural core writers group in the Bay Area, and in Corvallis, Oregon, where he serves as a teaching faculty and a member of a National Science Foundation team at OSU. Everyone, welcome Cleavon.
Thank you, Brittany. And I'm supposed to give the humble, as if,
Microphone?
as testing. I should just a little closer. Okay. It always happens that way. Okay. Is that better? All right. Kiss the mic, as they say. So I just wanted to start a lot of different places. Actually, I want to start in 20 different places, but I have to start in one. And I will begin by saying that I am really honored and always feel great to be in a library, a public library. As a child, and excuse me, one of my best friends from home back in Mississippi, who I still keep in touch with, she wrote me recently because we are obligated to write each other when someone wins the big mega millions lottery. We check in with each other to make sure that neither of us was the one to win it because the other owes us something of their earnings or their winnings. And so she just communicated with me. She, like a couple of weeks ago, and I had to remind her that our friendship began because her mother was Mrs. Joyner, who was the librarian in my hometown library, who I thought was the most amazing person after my mom in that town. And I spent all of my summers in the library taking out as many books as I possibly could. And so for that reason, it feels especially special to be at a library giving this talk. And I feel like I should start at a lot of different places because over the last 2 weeks, I have been at least a dozen places within myself about this particular lecture. This is probably the most difficult presentation I've ever given in my life. And I say that sincerely. I don't say that in any particular way of trying to like. It's not. It's not. I don't know what it is not, but I know what it is. And I think 30 minutes ago I came to somewhere with it. And so what I will share with you to begin with is what came out just maybe 20 minutes ago. And then beyond that, I will share with you some of the other different places I started to come in with, but one place that I feel more firmly grounded in sharing, just because I think it's something really neat to share about what's happening in the literary and extra literary world of Black culture. And so what I wrote, just and Mike would have seen me up there when I went upstairs, is and you will see probably that it is very much informed by the writing style of Hell of a Book. I have begun and stopped and run from this lecture over a dozen times. I have celebrated my insight and cursed my ignorance. I have cursed. I feel cursed. I deplore standing, pacing up here before you. I feel as if there is a target on my chest. I am supposed to be something I am not. I hate being what I am not. I hate being expected to be what I am not. I hate being. I hate me, and in hating myself, I hate you. I hate any reminder that I am not what I am not. I am scared. I am not. I speak with conviction, not the conviction I was taught, the Robeson-esque conviction, erect and baritone, a kind of conviction that is my own, quivering and betraying. I must decide what I will betray. That what is me. Which part of myself will I betray? Some part so used to being betrayed that it has become numb to my doing so, complicit in severing the nerve, in finding a work around, like shifting the gear of my car with my left hand. Or some part of myself that I rarely betray, whose wail makes me wail, like the yelp of a dog that I've accidentally stepped on, or the child whose chapped nose I irritated with a harsh wipe. A wail that cries, why? A why that whispers, how could you? Or some part of myself that I have always, because I have been taught by the billions of images I have captured and meticulously studied over my lifetime, because what I want is what any of us wants, security, the name which for generations my kin have searched through the matrix to find, which can only be found in proxy. How could I betray that part of myself that I have learned never to offer up? I will never offer up. Why? How could you? I hear it now. I'm quivering, un-Robeson-esque. I betray and somehow feel liberated. Only the parade of this liberation has no trumpets, no trombones, or trilling woodwinds in 4/4 time. It waits. It wails. I wrote that because it feels in so many ways disingenuous to be standing here talking to you about this book. This book resonates with me in a very intimate manner, in the kind of way that I would feel a lot more comfortable talking about in the barbershop, um, with my uncles, with my TTs, with the kids who picked on me. It's the kind of book that we would look at each other and we would say, without saying, we would nod, knowing that what we are saying, and we could hold it collectively and somehow wish that it were out there in the world, but at the same time, appreciate that it's something that we can share amongst ourselves. And and that's where I landed. Some of the places I went, and just imagining this book in a canon of Black literature over time. And because I went to the Naval Academy, and I do remember a little bit of my Navy navigation and navigating with triangles and knowing if I know where the invisible man is, and if I know where the bluest eye is, and I know where hell of a book is, and I know where I am in reference to those things, I know where I am in the world. And then I can safely navigate the literary world. And that is such a cerebral relationship with these books. And in having such a cerebral relationship with these books, while intellectually it might be stimulating, it is denying so much of myself and so much of where we can connect. But I continued on that path. And I'm thinking, okay, Invisible Man is this exploration where it goes inward. And I am going to go inward from this world and find who I am and not have myself be defined or my purpose be defined by others, not by the college president, not by the leadership of the brothers, and most specifically, not by Raz. You know, not more specifically, but more immediately, not by Raz. Uh, Informed by Reinhardt the Runner, who, if those of you who are familiar with Invisible Man, knows that Reinhardt the Runner is at once a pimp and a preacher, a loving spouse. He is and a runner on the streets. Reinhardt the Runner. So long as the Invisible Man puts on the hat in the sun in the shades, he can weave himself through the world in all of these personas. And so he goes underneath. He goes underground. He goes and he becomes himself, knowing that he is invisible, he is not seen by the world. And then I can take Piccola from The Bluest Eye and how the same conditions that the invisible man was experiencing, you know, the same conditions under which he lived, she takes that rage outwardly and she internalizes her ugliness, for lack of a better expression, the ugliness of being Black. She internalized that and has a very rageful relationship with the world. And then I come in, and so in one, and also Invisible Man is first person, and Bluest Eye is third person. And this book is something between first person and third person. And so it's like, okay, I'm seeing where this situates in the Black canon. I sit on that for a couple of weeks and I'm just coming up with more and more examples. And then I have this moment where I go into, as Mott says in the book or writes in the book, you know, deep depression. And I'm like, how is this not yet another addition to the bricks masonry of the slave narrative? How is this not another example of speaking to the Black experience, to this world that sees it and acknowledges it, but is not moved by it? As if in the original sense of the slave narrative being something to counter the narrative of those who perpetuated the political environment of enslavement, not specifically, not merely, not only the enslavers, but those who built and strived and thrived within that particular institution. And so the slave narrative was to counter that, to show that no, the experiences of those who are enslaved runs counter to the experience that we are being told. And through that, there is some abolitionist goal that we can achieve through this narrative, through these narratives. That goal, that political goal, has proven itself to be insufficient. Being politically emancipated is not the same as being emancipated, because we are not merely political beings. And so thinking of that and thinking of like, oh, what this book does so great, it talks about the Black condition in this really contemporary manner. And then I'm like, how is this different from any of the other narratives that we read that were published in the early 1800s? And I'm thinking, I don't want to think about that too much. And so then I try something different. I tried, okay, well, let's get outside of that and let's bring in other text. Let's bring in Huckleberry Finn, because that is a great American novel. And also William Faulkner, because I'm from Mississippi and he is a great American novelist. And I can take Compson from William Faulkner and Go Down Moses and think about that moment where he says he came into, where the narrator says that Compson came into his heritage. He had been playing around, and I'm sorry, those of you who are familiar or not familiar with Go Down Moses, in this particular scene, Compson is with his best friend. His best friend is, which is his nanny's son. And they have been running together, fishing together, playing together, spending the nights together all their lives. And he doesn't know it because this is Yoknapatawpha County. They're cousins. They just don't know this yet. One's Black, one's white, but they're cousins. But they are best friends more than anything. And one day, it just doesn't feel right that this Black kid is eating at the same table as the young Compson. And he's like, you don't eat with me right now. And he doesn't know why, but it's like just really eating at him, but he knows that this is not the way it should be. And then when they're at the end of the day, when it's time for them to have their rest, go to sleep, all their lives they've been sleeping in the same bed as kids. And then he's like, actually, you lie down on the pallet tonight. And his Black friend, his Black cousin, his nanny's son was like, okay. He knew it was about time. It was going to happen sooner or later. And young Compson was like, just churning and churning. And the narrator writes, he came into his heritage. And what that did for me was like the first moment as a reader where I read a white writer talking about whiteness. He came into his heritage, and it wasn't something to be celebrated. It was a damnation. And so, okay, Go Down Moses, Invisible Man, and hell of a book. All right, so now let me start playing with that. I'm like, wait a minute, just a second. I got Faulkner over there. And what about Huckleberry Finn? You know, that moment when Finn goes to pray about what he should do, where he should go, okay, now it's like he's gone to the limits. He's about to get caught. He can't run anymore. And he wants to pray. He wants to pray to God to help him figure out what he should do about Jim, what he should do about this journey, this adventure of his. And he can't utter a word of prayer because the God his aunt prays to cannot be the God who is going to give him an answer to his problem. Because if that God is the God that tells him to return Jim, that can't be God at all. And so I'm like, okay, I have two great American white authors who are talking about whiteness in ways that we don't get very often, and very seldomly is that what is taught to us when we are reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn or Faulkner. And most of Faulkner that really gets to it, we don't teach anyway because it's too difficult to teach that in Mississippi and anywhere else in this country, I'm finding. And so we have that. And now where does Hell of a Book fit there? So now it goes outside of the Black canon, and now it's within a larger canon of literature, of American literature, the literature of America that it is aiming to identify itself, to define itself, and reckoning with the acknowledgement that to identify and recognize, acknowledge itself is recognizing, acknowledging race in this country. And so, like, okay, so now I can situate Mott's book not just in a Black canon, but in an American canon. And so that was great. That felt good for a while. And then I started thinking, oh, wait a minute. I can go beyond this. I can go, okay, well, Murakami. I love Murakami. Haruki Murakami, the Japanese novelist, Wild Sheep Chase, um, all of those, like I'm blanking on some of the other titles right now, but I'm thinking about Hardball Wonderland and The End of the World. Um, and okay, there is this surrealist aspect that is happening in this book. It is surreal. And we are in these places, we don't know what is real. Surreal is above reality. Like we don't know what's real, who's real, who's the narrator. Is the narrator Soot? Is Soot the narrator? Is this, and even the narrator keeps saying over and over, are you real? Am I imagining you? Who is that person? And so I'm like, oh wow, great. We have these texts. And then like, oh, one of my mentors was Micheline Aharonian Marcom, and she writes about the Armenian genocide in Turkey. And then one of the characters, or one of the characters from her first book, Three Apples Fell from Heaven, winds up as a refugee in Beirut. And she writes her second novel. It's called The Daydreaming Boy. And so much of that narrative is very similar to this, where he is like, in order to situate himself to understand who he is, he just daydreams. And he's having these out of body experiences. What do we talk about? Like out of body experiences, trauma. He's experiencing trauma. And so now I'm thinking, okay, now this book, where does it fit in this canon of traumatic writing? All of that's happening. And so these are the different places where I'm going with this. And then I finally, I've come to Afro-Surrealism. And Afro-Surrealism is something that many people will say, has existed since the beginning of African expression in literature and art in the colonial world. And in 2018, 17, I think it was, there was a Afro-Surrealist manifesto that was written, and in that manifesto, it was an attempt to speak to how to express Blackness in this world, understanding and identifying the absurdity of Blackness in a white world. And part of what was given in the manifesto was, if you're dealing with an absurd fiction every day in your life, something you know is not real, yet you have to treat as if it is real. Blackness is not real, but we have to treat as if it is real. You're already in a surreal situation without having to do anything. The surrealists that we most are familiar with, like they did their drugs, they did all these kinds of seances and stuff to get above reality. But in this manifesto, it just reads that you don't have to do all of those things if you're Black in the world that we live in. All you have to do is just see yourself and see the world as it is, see the fiction that you have to accept as real. In creating an identity while pacifying the white identity, this says that this is who you are, even though you know for a fact that's not who you are. That is the foundation of the surrealist, the Afro surrealist manifesto. And so I wanted to share a couple of those things with you, just so that you know that I actually did some kind of preparation. But in all reality, if I'm being honest with you, what I wanted to get out of this was not a stipend. What I wanted to get out of this was a conversation. But I was told that I'm supposed to give some kind of lecture. And so I'm giving the lecture. But I want to get out of this lecture as quickly as I possibly can so I can hear from you. So I can hear from you. Why did you read this book? Why was this book chosen? Why did you come after having read this book? Why are you here today? Because what I want to leave with is not with this idea of myself having spoken to others. I want to leave here with the same thing, possibly, that I left having read Faulkner, having read Twain. I want to leave here with not just an understanding of where this book fits in the canon. I want to leave here with an understanding of where the canon fits in the community. And so I would just share a couple of things. And like I said, I'm just doing this because I felt like I had to do it. And which is okay. I like now that I'm here for 15, 20 minutes, I feel much more comfortable with that. Um, and now I have to figure out how to share my screen. So let me go do that. It's always strange when you see yourself. And this is not a fancy presentation in the least. I didn't provide much of anything, to be honest. And let's see. Where am I going? Let's go here and see how many. I started screen sharing. It is paused. And it is not sharing. And so let's move on. Not to move, I will share with you. It's only text. It's not a bit. I am positive. It's only text. And so it is titled, "The Lecture I Refused to Write and Lament to Share." It's subtitled because I'm an academic. We have subtitles, and it has in quotes because I'm an academic. Also, air quotes, talking about hell of a book with a hell of an audience. The one image that I wish I could share with you is from Claudia Rankine's Citizen, which in and of itself is another one of those Afro-Surrealist texts. It is neither a book of poems nor it is a book of essays, but it is a hell of a book in its own right. And in that book, she wrote to the Getty. She attempted to get this image of a lynching from the Getty, and the Getty would not release it to her. They would not give her the rights to use the image because so often images of lynchings uh, situate in the gazes on the lynched bodies. But in Rakine's, what she does, what her husband does, she takes that image and she erases the lynched bodies from the image, and all you're left with are the attendees of the lynching, and they become the subjects of this particular photograph, rather than the bodies being the subjects of that photograph. And I wanted to start with that particular image because a part of the manifesto, I'm just going to share with you a couple of the bullets of the manifesto, is Afro-Surrealism presupposes that beyond the visible world, there is an invisible world striving to manifest. Beyond the visible, there is an invisible world striving to manifest. And so the visible world is the community gathering at the lynching and the Black bodies hanging from the tree. The invisible world is not the bodies hanging from the tree, but those who have gathered to witness this. Focusing on changing what is the subject and the object is a part of changing what's visible and what is invisible. And Mott does that quite often in this book, where we what we don't know if they are his imaginings, but those imaginings become so very real throughout the text. And so much so that I think most of us, if we were found explaining scenes in this text would explain those scenes as if they were actual tangible scenes before the narrator, until we realized, like, wait a minute, was this the narrator imagining or not imagining? Was this the narrator? Was there really a peacock there? Or was there not a peacock there? Afro Surrealists restore the cult of the past. We revisit old ways with new eyes. We appropriate 19th century slave symbols like Kara Walker and 18th century colonial ones like Unica Shinobare. And in this way, the Afro Surrealists take the slave narrative and turn it on its head. And I think Hell of a Book is such a text as that, that it's taking something of the past and turning it on its head. And one of the ways in which this turns it on its head, and it speaks to another bullet in the manifesto, is the narrator who has, I don't want to say reluctantly, but was surprised to find and discover that he was Black because Rennie told him that he was Black. Or reminded him, I should say, was it takes this idea of like, who is responsible? Who should do something? And whereas in the slave narrative, the goal, the aim was to get others to rise up and, the voting population, white men, to take political action and end political enslavement, the right to enslave. This aim is like, oh, well, it's not just the white male voter who is responsible. It is all of us who are responsible. And so that is this, restoring the cult of the past and then, like shifting it ever so slightly so that it is of use today. And another bullet is the Afro Surrealists strive for the Rococo. And the Rococo, I'm not sure if you're very familiar with, like it's like really super ornate, those paintings where it's just like the very definition of sentimentality, where it's like sweeter than God intended, and so like it's so ornate, and the robes and everything is curved, and the drapery is like so beautiful, and we get quite a bit of that in this text when, for example, Soot is at the psychiatrist's office and the tree blossoms and the flowers, it just keeps flowering and flowering, or the peacock, and it's just so beautifully Black. We just had these moments where it just gets so ornately beautiful. And in that beauty, we kind of lose ourselves. And in losing ourselves, we fall deeper and deeper into the narrative. And the Afro Surrealist life is fluid, filled with aliases and census defying classifications. It has no address or phone number, no single discipline or calling. And, the Afro Surrealists are ambiguous. Am I Black or white? Am I straight or gay? Controversy is key. And and so in this, um, as the narrator, as the unnamed narrator of a portion of this book goes by, is like, who am I? What am I in relation to this? Am I from this neighborhood? Am I not from this neighborhood? Do I have anything to say before the community that is gathered? Do I not have anything to say? Did I write that book? Was it about my mother? It wasn't about my mother. That it just, he is fluid. He fluidly goes through the world. He's untethered, but it's not just that he's untethered, it's that he has no name. The Afro Surrealist wears a mask while reading Leopold Senghor. And Leopold Senghor was one of the key movers of negritude, the movement that is mostly francophone. That was I guess, the equivalent of that movement is the Black Arts movement in the States. Um, and so the Afro Surrealist wears a mask while reading that. And I think it's just really funny. And you can tell also, like, a really academic person wrote this manifesto. And what it kind of means to me is that, and as in the book, it says, there's a catch in convincing yourself that you don't know a thing. And the narrator goes on, yeah, it keeps your life on track, but for the thing or person you're choosing not to see or know, you're taking away their whole entirety. And again, kind of going back to that ambiguous nature, um, the writer, the narrator is speaking to himself. He's speaking to himself, but having assumed this alias, having been, like, in his fluidity, it is probably one of the most direct statements to a white audience one can make without making a direct statement to a white audience, because he's speaking to himself, right? He's speaking to himself. But in speaking to himself, it's like, oh, I can hear this thing that sometimes when it's being spoken to myself, I don't necessarily hear. And I guess this is kind of, the Afro Surrealist is ambiguous as Prince. Um, and some would say, I think Prince is a better person to put in there. As big, ambiguous as Michael Jackson, as Black as Fanon, as literary as Ishmael Reed, and as dandy as Andre Leon Talley. The Afro Surrealist seeks definition in the absurdity of a post-racial world. In that absurdity of a post-racial world, I thought one of the best moments in the book was when he goes for his, when Sharon takes him to Jack. It takes the author to Jack, and Jack goes to Sharon like, you didn't tell me he was Black. And Sharon was like, yeah, I wanted to see if you could tell from his writing. And so, in that, the absurdity of a post-racial world, this narrator, the author, Mott, dips us deeply into from the very beginning. Other examples of, I think, more immediate examples of Afro-Surrealist literature or art, we may see in the television show Atlanta, or in movies such as They Clone Tyrone, as well as Sorry to Bother You. And so those are some titles where you see this Afro Surrealist movement most taking hold, because in the visual world you can play with that a lot more in video. But I think Mott has taken that manifesto and put it to fiction in ways that a lot of people are going to be following in the near future, and it is very separate from Afrofuturism. And so it's not futurism, it's not Delaney, it's not, oh man, I hate when I get up in there, I forget names. Octavia Butler. It's not Octavia Butler. It's not Delaney. That's Afrofuturism, and this is more Afro-surrealistic. So there was something prepared. I hated sharing that because it was so incredibly canned. It was so inauthentic in so many ways. And so now that I've turned that part of myself off, I would like to open, as I said I would 15 minutes ago, to not just your questions, but some of my questions, if you will. So, Brittany, how do we do this?
We can, usually folks just speak up, and usually you would then repeat the question for the sake of the folks.
Okay, so do I get to ask the first question?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, great. Awesome, awesome, awesome. And this is where I don't feel that uncomfortable. So, the elephant in the room. What is the elephant in the room?
Oh, that we're white and you're black, telling us what's happening.
Is that the elephant in the room?
First one that came to
That's the
mind.
first one that came to mind for you?
Who read the book? It's the
Who read the
elephant.
Ah,
The book.
you didn't read the book?
Have you sparked my interest? And you have. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's not the elephant in the room. You named it. The elephant in the room is never named.
Yeah, but aren't we friends here and we're gonna name it?
We're gonna name it. Hmm. I don't know. But thanks for outing yourself as someone who didn't read the book. There are copies at the library, right? Yeah. Okay, great. What is the elephant in the room?
Who's gonna do something?
Who's going to do something? All right. I mean, we have one person who's playing this game with me. I never ask questions that I have the answer to. I don't ask rhetorical questions in that way. So please don't think that I have an answer to it. This is an honest to God, genuine question. What is the elephant in the room?
The thing that nobody can name, but it's affecting all of us, is that what you mean? We all see it, but we can't. That's it? Is that what you mean?
The more we talk about it, the better I'm understanding what I mean. I'm like, I am seriously, sincerely stating, I am not expecting any answer, any specific answer. I am just really interested in what to you is the elephant in the room. So I've heard from my friend here. Anyone else? What to you is the elephant in the room? Yes, please.
Me?
In the back row.
You're, you're a presumably middle-aged black man speaking to an audience of mostly older white women. I think we might have one or two men in the room. And
What makes that the elephant in the room?
to me, it just seems a little strange why there isn't a larger variety of people here, which may reflect Corvallis.
Okay. All right. But and may I your pronouns?
She.
And so is her elephant your elephant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could it not be?
How could it not be? I don't know, because we have different experiences. You know, for some of us, like that elephant has gotten on that ship and sailed. And so it's like, oh, it is there. And so like that elephant is no longer on my chest, you know, like it is reality. And so like I've identified it. And so it no longer has the same hold on me as it once did, you know? So it is possible that that is not the elephant in the room for some of us.
Can I ask you what the elephant is in the room for you?
Oh, goodness gracious.
Sorry.
Oh man, you're not sorry. You're not sorry. Don't pretend for a second that you're sorry. Um, the elephant in the room for me is the who that I am going to be first and foremost to myself, and then in front of you, in front of strangers. You know, so that's the elephant in the room for me, because I never know what's going to happen. I never know who's going to show up, and I hate that. I hate that. I hate that being an obstacle in any relationship. It's like, how can you establish a real intimate relationship, a caring, mutual relationship with another person if you're starting from a place of withholding? And how can I not withhold when to present makes me vulnerable to pain that history has taught me to shield myself from? And so that's the elephant in the room that I began facing when I went upstairs to write what I shared at the beginning. Because I want more than anybody, or as much as anyone else, to have an honest, sincere relationship with the people I'm in proximity with. and those I'm not in proximity with. I'm a writer. I'm trying to reach beyond myself, beyond what I can see. And this is one of the first times, if not the first time, that I've publicly shared that most of my engagements with my neighbors here in Corvallis is one in which I am withholding more than I am sharing. You're welcome. Yes, please.
You opened with a very lovely self-disclosure, and so the elephant for me is my self-disclosure. I recall that when I was a young kid, I loved to read, but I was reading children's books. And then I don't remember the steps, but I was nudged along and helped to learn how to read literature. And I love that. I come to all the random reviews, like the lady behind me. Sometimes it's just because I want to see, is that a book I want to read, or do I just want to learn about that? I realize I have a big deficit when it comes to surrealism. I'm a retired social worker. I was married to an engineer before he died. I used to be a biology teacher. I'm used to things being literal and linear. Now, as an academic, as someone at the university, could you give me some hints on how to navigate surrealism when I'm alone in my home?
I think that's the best place to navigate it. That's the easiest place to navigate it. I'm
I'm
being a little facetious.
frustrated.
Um, oh, and I'm sorry, I'm on my device and I'm looking for Walt Whitman help me. Um, and I'm like, see, I'm looking for it. Ah, yes. Have you reckoned 1,000 acres much? Have you reckoned the earth much? Have you practiced so long to learn to read? Have you felt so proud to get at the meaning of poems? Stop this day and night with me, and you shall possess the origin of all poems. You shall possess the good of the earth and the sun. There are millions of suns left. And when I read that, it's like, oh, it liberated me because so much of our academic teaching, as far as how to read, is a teaching of how to become beholden to conventions, conventions of expression, conventions of literature. And I think how to surrealism, I don't know, does anybody have any, how did other people take to understand and to just like become comfortable with hell of a book? How did other people do it? Because the way I entered it, is coming from some of that manifesto. I entered it like because I had a personal experience. I have a lived experience that helps me enter this particular expression of surrealism. Other expressions of surrealism, I may not as easily find my footing in. And so I want to share that, and I also want to hear from other people. How did other people who don't necessarily have the same lived experience I have, how did you find a way of navigating through this text and feeling somewhat sure of your footing? Not always sure of your footing, but somewhat. How did other people do it that read the book? Please.
Well, it was confusing, but it was fun to just kind of let your mind go and, see all these things that were happening in his mind. And he was just also so human, rummaging through the mini bar and, crashing around in the convention and, just that feeling of personal uncertainty and discomfort in the world that just, was more of an experience. I was really happy to hear, some of the ways to think about it because, I don't have that training. And the whole idea of surrealism being not what you would normally see as a focal point, but everything absorbing that focal point is just such a cool way to look at that book. I have to read it again.
And I think for this particular text, what I appreciate about it as a surrealist novel is the sense that there's an intimacy in it. and it's messy and you're opening up, like, I'm going to show my messiness to you. And that messiness comes from a place of like, the minute I tell you that I'm having all these imaginings, I'm letting you know that I want you to participate in this with me. I'm not in some kind of like aloof, kind of like, let me show you how the world really is that you don't really see. And I am so smart because I see it and you don't until you get on this, until you have this gummy with me, you know? And so I think part of it is, and with all text for me, with all text, I personally try to enter like trusting that the goal of this author is intimate communication. And when I trust in that, then I no longer, it's not so much that I am entering the book on their terms, but it is I am entering the book with this trust that they are going to hold me through it. One way I do that is I read aloud. I read the very first chapter aloud. And I have to do that because then I start feeling like I can get into the rhythm of the author. And once I find the author's rhythm, the author's heartbeat, then I can be on the loudest subway ride, the loudest cafe, and I can't disengage with that rhythm. And yeah, yeah.
You answered my question.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking of like a million pop songs that talk about the heartbeat. Um, can you feel my heartbeat? Okay, other questions? Statements? Who read the book? A plus plus. Who's just interested? Who came because you were with someone who read the book? Just joking. All right. You're a good person, Charlie Brown.
Interested in listening to you, though. I wanted to hear you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, like wanted to hear somebody that you've never met, known before.
Struggled with when she was reading it. She talked to me about it sometimes. Usually she doesn't, but she was, yeah, it's hard. You know, I'm from the sixties, so it sounds a little bit like an acid trip, but not really. But is that surrealist?
I mean, in a lot of ways, it is an acid trip. And one of the things I love about this book is it kind of communicates in the most clear sense that I found in prose form that being Black in America is an acid trip. It's a total and absolute acid trip. I don't need to take any acid because, as I said, it's like part of it is this. You're dealing with an absurd fiction every day of who you are, an absurd fiction of who you are every day. And you know it's not real, but you have to operate within it as if it's real because otherwise there's mortal danger. And so you know it is not real, but you have to operate as if it is real. That's an acid trip if I ever heard of one. And so I think he expresses that in ways that I'm grateful because now it's like, you know, it's like when I was in my 20s, and if I met someone and I was really interested in them, and I'm like, you want to get to know me? Here's this mixtape that I've made for you. Just listen to these songs and read these poems, and you know who I am. And then now I'm like, oh, you want to know me? Here's a hell of a book. Yes, please.
May butt in again. Ruha Benjamin is coming to our campus in a couple weeks. And I've recently read her book, Imagination.
Mm.
And that is very, that's a real like tsunami of looking into just everything. But her main thing is like the power of imagination. You know, whose world are we the subject now of their past imaginations, and how do we, you know, get to a new one? And she quotes somebody named Thomas Berry. No,
Don't know.
me neither. But anyway, he has a little bit in her book about he sits, we're in between stories now, we're in between narratives. We're all done with the manifest destiny and, you know, survival of the fittest and all the things that brought us to where we are now. And now we need to imagine a different way of being. And so I was just wondering, just taking that phrase, we are in between narratives now, and all the forms that you've just enlightened me about, you know, Afro-realism and Afro-futurism. Is that where we are coming to a new imagination, I guess?
One of the things that I have, no, I'm going to try to be more sincere. I'm going to be more honest. I was going to say, one of the things I have a little problem with, blah, blah, blah. I was like, one of the things I just find is ultimately one of the biggest lies of academia is the collective we.
Mhm.
Usually when I hear it, it is like the collective we, white America or white people or white Europeans, blah, blah, blah. When I think about what you're saying, I'm just like, man, my whole life has been in between imaginings. You know, and then in the Black community, there's an expression like, you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. And in knowing that you are your ancestors' wildest dreams, and you're like, well, that dream ain't come true. And so, like, being in between those imaginings, being in between the imagining of my parents who grew up in Jim Crow, Mississippi, my grandparents who grew up in Reconstructionist Mississippi, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents who grew up enslaved in Mississippi. Like, their imagined world has still yet to come. And so there was no demarcation of one imagining, you know, like getting to the Pacific Ocean, there's not been the transcontinental railway in that experience. And so I think maybe, but that's the pushback, but maybe like the really fun thing is like, oh, now white America has, maybe that's like that moment in Missouri where the two train line railways are coming together. It's like, oh, in between. I'm comfortable in being in between because my whole existence has been in between. And so it's like, so maybe we're the authority. Come and talk to us. We'll tell you about being in between imaginings. Not to belittle that, but yeah, that's my reaction, my response to it.
She's all about social change. How do we actually get to a different world, you know? So
How do we get to a different world? Yeah. No. I'm just like, I wasn't even asking that as a question. It was like the idea, the thought. How do we get to a different world? Yes, please.
Curious how you got to Oregon.
How I got to Oregon.
I was thinking that might be your different world.
Oh, goodness gracious. You know, like it's really funny. I have so many things to say about Oregon. I've been here a couple years. My ex-wife is from Corvallis.
Really?
And I would come and visit her dad, like in the summers. If you want to suck someone into this town, just tell them to visit in June, July, August. Oh man, it's idyllic. You know, and I would go to the old Sunnyside Cafe right on 3rd. And within 2 days, I was like a local. I knew everybody. I'm like, oh, I love it here. You know, and I would be in here in the summer. So I was just writing and writing and writing, walk downtown. I loved it. And when she was finally like, hey, I'm over the Bay Area. And I'm also like, I want to be with my dad while he's, you know, ill, before it gets to the place where like we can't relate in the way that she really wants to. I was like, you know, my work, I can do my work pretty much anywhere. I kind of want to get out and see stars. And so, yeah, came up here that way. And I have seen more rainbows in Corvallis than I ever saw anywhere else collectively. Yeah.
I was curious because my husband was the former mayor and he always said Corvallis is a city of choice.
Well, so a long conversation about that. I'm looking at the time and I think our time is up, and I'm gonna have to think about that choice. It is a city of choice. Um, Sometimes I guess it's a city of no choice. No, but it is a city of choice.
As to why people chose to come in.
Yeah, I don't think it's not a destination city in that sense. No, but it is a city that hosted the conversation about a hell of a book. And for that, for whatever anybody else from the outside may say, I have to say that I'm grateful that we hosted this conversation and I got to talk to you today. And and you all helped me be a little more brave today than I was yesterday. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
And I didn't need Brittany to come up here and take the mic from me. I'm more than happy to stick around and talk. Some of you didn't answer some questions and I know you wanted to. And I want to hear what you have to say. Oh,